attracts a woman more than good hygiene? It's good character. A woman is attracted by a husband of integrity. Verse 3b, your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the maidens love you. Guys, it's not about more or better techniques, so stop looking at the headings on Chatelaine when you're buying groceries. Are you the kind of husband who's unselfish and able to balance his own interests with the interests of his spouse or with his children? Or are you always at the golf course, always on the Harley, always with the boys at the pub? Do you keep your commitments? Is your personal reputation important to you? Are you respected in the broader community? Are you respected in this church community? Are you respected in your work community? Because if you are, your wife will be turned on. Verse 4. Take me away with you. Let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers. Stop. Combine good hygiene with good character, and you got sparks. Husbands, while you're being brave later today, ask your spouse, is there anything about my character that you find unattractive? In verse 4, the women's friends kick in. They always do. And they say, we rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine. What are this woman's friends saying? Well, they're saying, he's such a great guy. You're so lucky. We're so happy for you. We're so excited. Way to go. Continuing on. The beloved speaks again, the woman. How right they are to adore you. She doesn't say, they have no idea what you're like at home. If they only knew what it's like to really live with you. She says, how right they are to adore you. And then she continues, dark am I, yet lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, dark like the tents of Kedar, like the tent curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I am dark, because I am darkened by the sun. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me take care of the vineyards. My own vineyards I have neglected. This woman is like Cinderella. There's no mention of her father, only her mother, which is very atypical in the Bible. Usually family names are passed down through the male side. So it suggests, perhaps, that she was raised by a single mom. And the fact that she had dark skin, the fact that her brothers forced her to work out in the fields all day, probably indicates that finances were tight. This was a necessity. And so she was forced to work out in the fields from sunup until sundown, hence the dark skin. Today, darkened skin is the standard for beauty. And so women with pale skin often go to tanning booths. When the song was written, pale skin was the standard of beauty. It was an indication of affluence. If you had pale skin, you didn't have to work in fields. You didn't have to be outside. You had money, or you came from money. And so what's this tell us? That she's talking about her skin and she's saying to the daughters of Jerusalem not to look at her. It's saying that this woman had an image issue. She was insecure about her image. She says, listen, I don't look like the women on the covers of the magazines. I don't look like Keira Knightley. I don't look like Megan Fox. And I believe there's a sense in which every woman is insecure about her image, as this woman in Song of Songs is. But she's also quick to add that she's beautiful to her husband. And that's all that matters. I was listening to Mark Driscoll teach on this passage, and I was so blown away by something that he said that I wanted to include it as an extensive quote, and I'm just going to share it with you here. Start of quote. Everyone must have their spouse as their standard of beauty. God's plan was that your spouse would be your standard of beauty. If you're married to someone who's short, then you love short. If you're married to someone who's tall, you love tall. If you're married to someone who's skinny, you love skinny. If you're married to someone who's not skinny, then you love not skinny. But you say, well, my spouse was skinny when we got married. Too bad. Your standard of what you love got changed. I'm dead serious. If you married at 25 and now you're 75, your standard of beauty isn't what your spouse looked like at 25, but what your spouse looks like at 75. Lust is comparing your spouse, your wife, your husband to others. Lust is desiring others. End of quote. Beautiful. And I don't think he could be more right about what he says here. And I wonder if the Sandra Bullocks of this world and the Mrs. Woods of this world would be going through what they're going through if their husbands would put this into practice. God's intention was that if you got married, your spouse would be your standard of beauty. Now, this doesn't mean that once we get married, we don't have to be concerned about our bodies anymore. Scripture's clear that every Christ follower has to be a steward of their body. That means eating right. It means exercising regularly, especially in our culture where most of us work in an office or push a button. Sometimes people say, well, the Bible doesn't talk much about exercising. That's because it was a hand-to-mouth culture where people worked in the field all day such that their skin got dark. Take care of your bodies. It doesn't mean that we don't have to make a sincere effort to remain attractive to our spouse. We do, because that's what people who love one another do. So your last bold question of the day, couples. Honey, is there anything I could do to be more attractive to you? And be fair. This is not an invitation to argue or fight or be pedantic. It's an opportunity to speak kindly and respectfully to your spouse in the context of all that you've heard already this morning. Well, I was going to wrap up with the next verse, but we are running out of time. So you're going to have to read it for yourself. It's not that interesting. Essentially what the wife does is she acknowledges her husband is busy and has hardly any time for her through the week. And so creatively she finds a way to meet him for lunch so that they can be sexually intimate together. But you can read that for yourself. Again, married couples, you have total freedom to do this. And if you're single or if you're dating but not yet married, you have total freedom not to do this. And before I wrap up the service with prayer, we've prepared a little gift for you married couples. And so here's what I want you to do. If you're sitting next to your spouse and you're not doing this already, I want you to take her hand and hold it. And I want you to keep holding it until I come back up here again. I'm serious. Some of you are laughing. If you're here with your spouse but you're not sitting next to each other because you're separated by 1 or 3 kids, then just get up for a second and reposition yourself so you're sitting next to your spouse. Your kids can move or you can move them. So if you need to do that, go ahead. And if your spouse isn't here this morning, and there could be any number of reasons, right? All the way from schedules, shifts, work, to lack of interest, which also can be very difficult. Then what I would let you know is that all of our messages are online by Tuesday. So you can watch it on our website or on YouTube. Sit down with your spouse. You could probably do more than hold hands in your home if you want. And watch this together. What are we doing, more than hold hands? Okay. So I was going to say, once I get seated next to my spouse, we're going to begin. Now, the quality of what we want to present, sometimes I'm a last-minute guy, and so the quality is not as good as it could be, but you're going to use your imaginations, listen to the words, and just hold hands, and then whoever's got lights can dim the lights, but let's just enjoy this. This is our gift to you.